This is Frasier's new apartment. The style of decorating is, as we say in the show, eclectic.
It doesn't matter if they match, they will go together.
This is the radio station. We've got all kind of, necessary equipment around to make it look like a phony set.
The beloved sitcom that defined intelligent comedy in the 1990s holds secrets far stranger than any psychiatric case Frasier Crane ever treated. Behind the refined Seattle apartment and witty banter lurked celebrity feuds, impossible animals, and creative decisions so bizarre they nearly derailed the entire show. Ready to discover what really happened when the cameras stopped rolling? Fact 1. Eddie was a rescued nightmare dog. Now, this is my father, Martin Crane. Dad, this is Daphne Moon. Nice to meet you. Oh, and who might this be? That is Eddie. Before Moose became television's most beloved four-legged actor, he was what his owners called an absolute disaster, a destructive force of nature nobody could control. The Jack Russell Terrier, who would eventually charm millions, started life in Florida with a family who quickly discovered they'd made a terrible mistake. Moose wasn't just misbehaved. He was genuinely dangerous and seemingly impossible to manage. His list of offenses reads like a criminal rap sheet. He climbed trees to escape the yard, already unusual for most dogs. He killed a neighbor's cat, creating serious tension in the community. Most dramatically, Moose destroyed not one, but 2 entire houses, with relentless chewing, digging, and general chaos. Can you imagine the insurance claims? The conversations with contractors trying to explain that a 15-pound terrier had essentially demolished your home? His frustrated family finally surrendered, handing Moose over to professional animal trainer Matilda DeCagny.
He's one of the very few dogs that I've actually raised at home. I normally rescue all my dogs.
Who specialized in difficult dogs. What his original owners saw as untrainable chaos, DeCagny recognized as raw intelligence and boundless energy that just needed proper direction. The transformation was remarkable. Within months, the dog who'd been too destructive for a regular household was performing complex tricks with impressive accuracy. When casting began for Frasier, DeCagny brought Moose to audition, and his expressive face won him the role immediately. The nightmare dog had become a professional actor. Sometimes the most difficult animals just need the right job to shine. Fact 2. Kelsey Grammer's requisite disrespect method. Niles, just remember to keep breathing and trust me, this is not the end. Your life is not over. Kelsey Grammer approached Frasier with an acting philosophy that drove his colleagues absolutely crazy, but which he believed was essential to his best performances. Rather than rehearsing scenes multiple times until every line became second nature, Grammer deliberately limited himself to rehearsing each scene only once. He would then learn his lines just moments before cameras rolled, keeping the dialogue fresh, but not fully ingrained into muscle memory. Grammer called this his requisite disrespect for the material, a technique he felt brought spontaneity and authentic energy to his performance. In his view, knowing lines too well made delivery feels stale and overly rehearsed, robbing his character of natural unpredictability. But here's where it gets interesting. This personal method created real challenges for guest stars who worked with him. Many guest performers prepared extensively for their appearances on the hit show, memorizing lines thoroughly and expecting their scene partners to do the same. Instead, they found themselves working opposite an actor who seemed almost cavalier about preparation, sometimes stumbling or pausing in unexpected ways. Some found it charming and thought it created interesting moments. Others found it unprofessional and difficult to work around, never quite knowing if Grammer would deliver his lines as written or improvise slightly. Have you ever worked with someone whose creative process made your job harder? That was the Frasier guest star experience. Fact 3. Lisa Kudrow was fired before filming. Before Perry Gilpin became the quick-witted radio producer Roz Doyle, another actress had already been cast and was actively rehearsing for the show's premiere. Lisa Kudrow, who would become a household name as Phoebe Buffay on Friends, was originally hired to play Roz during Frasier's pre-production phase in 1993. The casting seemed promising on paper, and Kudrow began working with the cast during initial rehearsals. However, By the third day of rehearsals, the show's producers noticed a fundamental problem. The chemistry between Kudrow and Grammer wasn't working. Specifically, they felt Kudrow's natural performance style was too gentle and lacked the sharp, forceful energy that Roz required. Roz needed to be Frasier's equal at work, someone who could verbally spar with him, push back against his pomposity, and hold her own in rapid-fire exchanges. The producers worried Kudrow's softer approach would make Roz seem overshadowed, rather than standing up to Grammer's powerful stage presence. Making the difficult decision to recast before filming even began, they let Kudrow go and brought in Perry Gilpin, whose more assertive delivery immediately clicked with the show's dynamics. While being fired must have been devastating at the time, Kudrow's career took off spectacularly just a year later, when Friends premiered in 1994, ultimately making her far more famous than she likely would have become as a supporting character on Frasier. Sometimes the worst professional rejection becomes the best thing that ever happened to you. Fact 4. The theme song's bizarre hidden meaning. The opening theme song features one of the most peculiar and cryptic lyrics in television history, and the story behind those words reveals just how specific the creative restrictions were during development. When Kelsey Grammer wrote and performed Tossed Salads and Scrambled Eggs, he was working under very particular guidelines from the show's producers. They had explicitly banned him from including any direct references to psychiatry, radio broadcasting, or even the show's title in the theme lyrics. This left Grammer with the challenge of somehow capturing the essence of what Frasier Crane did for a living without actually saying what he did. The solution he came up with was deliberately abstract and metaphorical. The phrase "tossed salads and scrambled eggs" was his way of describing Frasier's radio callers and psychiatric patients as being mixed up or confused, needing help to sort through their tangled problems. The scrambled eggs represented minds that were jumbled and needed untangling, while the tossed salads suggested lives thrown together haphazardly. The full lyric continues with phrases about not knowing what to do with these tossed salads and scrambled eggs, mirroring Frasier's daily challenge of helping people whose lives are in disarray. What makes this even stranger is that Grammer deliberately kept the lyrics vague and surreal enough that most viewers assumed they were just nonsense words chosen because they sounded good together. For years, audiences sang along to the catchy tune without realizing there was any deeper meaning at all.
Three little maids from school are we? This is schoolgirl, well, maybe.
Thinking it was simply a quirky jazz standard, rather than a coded description of psychiatric work disguised as a recipe gone wrong. How many times did you sing along without knowing what you were actually saying? Fact 5. Martin's chair was intentionally made hideous. Wait, I'm just saying that I've had a bit of a breakthrough. Oh, dandy. You've had a breakthrough and I've lost my chair. Maybe I could sit on your breakthrough. One of the most memorable visual gags in Frasier was the stark contrast between Frasier's elegant apartment and his father Martin's beloved recliner, which looked like it belonged in a completely different show. That clash wasn't accidental or the result of finding some random ugly chair at a second-hand store. The production design team actually custom-built Martin's chair specifically for the show with the explicit goal of making it as visually offensive as possible. The set designer started with a clear mission: create a piece of furniture that would make viewers immediately understand the culture clash between refined Frasier and his working-class father. They wanted something that would make Frasier's horror
Oh my God! You'll get Frasier, you'll get that Niles!
at having this chair in his pristine apartment completely believable. To achieve this, they hunted through fabric archives until they found an offcut of original 1970s upholstery material in a particularly unfortunate shade of olive green with an outdated pattern. This wasn't fabric that looked like it was from the 70s. It actually was vintage 1970s material that had been sitting in storage for nearly 20 years. They chose this specific piece because it represented everything high-end interior design in the 1990s was trying to move away from. The chair was then deliberately constructed to look worn and shabby, with visible stains and a general air of having survived decades of heavy use. The contrast was made even more dramatic by the apartment itself, which the production designers filled with art and furniture worth approximately $500,000 in total, including genuine designer pieces and expensive art. Every time Martin's chair appeared on screen, sitting in the middle of all that carefully curated elegance, it was exactly as jarring and wrong as the designers intended. Fact 6. Niles wasn't supposed to exist. I hate your unicorn collection. I hate that your closet is bigger than mine. You're too tall. You're too short. When Frasier was first being developed as a spin-off from Cheers, the character of Niles Crane didn't exist in any early scripts or planning documents. The show's creators had no intention of giving Frasier a brother, partly because they'd just finished working on Wings, which centered on two brothers, and they didn't want to repeat that dynamic. However, during the casting process for other roles, something remarkable happened that changed the entire direction of the series. When David Hyde Pierce came in to audition for a completely different part, the casting directors were struck by his uncanny physical resemblance to a younger Kelsey Grammer. The similarity was almost eerie. They shared facial features, mannerisms, and even similar body language. Someone in the room made the observation that Pierce looked like he could actually be Grammer's brother, and that comment sparked an immediate creative conversation. The producers and writers quickly realized they'd stumbled onto something special. If they created a brother character specifically for Pierce,
I'm sorry.
Me too.
Oh,
It was my fault. No, it was all my fault. I started the whole thing. I'm a terrible person.
they could build in a visual joke that would work every single episode without anyone ever having to mention it directly. More importantly, they recognized that Pierce's acting style, similar to but distinct from Grammer's theatrical approach, would create fascinating dynamics. Within a short time, they'd completely reimagined the show's structure to include Niles, making him not just Frasier's brother, but almost a mirror version of him. Equally pretentious, equally cultured, but somehow even more neurotic and repressed. The character became so central to the show's success that it's almost impossible to imagine Frasier without him. Yet he was created entirely by accident, based on one actor's face. Can you imagine the show without Niles? It would be like removing half the comedy. Fact 7. Eddie got more fan mail than the stars. Despite Frasier featuring multiple Emmy-winning actors and being built around Kelsey Grammer's star power, the cast member who received the most fan mail throughout the show's run wasn't any of the human performers. Moose, the Jack Russell Terrier who played Eddie, consistently received more letters, cards, and packages from viewers than Grammer, David Hyde Pierce, John Mahoney, or any other actor. Fans were completely captivated by the expressive little dog and wrote to him constantly, sending everything from heartfelt letters about how much they loved Eddie to gifts and treats meant specifically for Moose himself.
Hello, Frasier. Oh, hello, Niles. Merry Christmas. What do I owe this occasion?
The volume of Eddie's fan mail wasn't just slightly higher than the human cast members, it was significantly and consistently more, week after week, year after year. This popularity extended beyond just letters from viewers.
You know very well what letter. The one you left in the apartment last month when you were home to visit Frederick.
In 1996, Entertainment Weekly magazine made the unprecedented decision to feature Moose alone on their cover without any of the human cast members accompanying him. This was essentially unheard of for a television animal performer and underscored just how famous Eddie had become. For Kelsey Grammer, who was the show's undisputed star and lead actor, this situation created genuine feelings of jealousy and frustration. Grammer was open about the fact that he resented being upstaged by a dog, and he wasn't particularly fond of Moose on set. The dynamic created an ironic parallel to the show itself, where Frasier was constantly irritated by Eddie's attention-stealing antics and the way Martin doted on the dog. Life was imitating art, with Grammer experiencing the same annoyance his character felt watching a Jack Russell Terrier somehow become more beloved than the supposedly sophisticated psychiatrist who was meant to be the center of attention. Fact 8. The dog refused affection from the cast. Moose's professionalism on the set of Frasier extended far beyond simply following commands and hitting his marks. His trainer, Matilda DeCagny, had worked with him so intensively and established such a strong bond. that Moose essentially refused to form emotional connections with anyone else. Throughout the entire 11-year run of the show, Moose never bonded with any of the human cast members in the way pet dogs typically become affectionate with people they see regularly. He viewed the set as his workplace and the actors as colleagues rather than friends or family. Between takes, Moose wouldn't seek out cuddles from John Mahoney, who played his on-screen owner Martin, nor would he play with other cast members or show them affection. His focus remained entirely on Ducagny, the only person he responded to with genuine warmth and attachment. This complete lack of emotional connection actually created a somewhat strange atmosphere on set, because everyone was working with an animal who seemed entirely indifferent to them as people. John Mahoney, who spent more time acting opposite Moose than anyone else on the show, eventually developed an unusual perspective on their working relationship. In interviews, Mahoney admitted he stopped thinking of Eddie as a dog in the traditional sense. Instead, he mentally categorized Moose as simply another actor who happened to have 4 legs. It was easier to think of Eddie as a professional colleague who showed up to do a job rather than as a pet who inexplicably didn't like him. This psychological adjustment helped Mahoney deal with the slightly surreal experience of spending years performing scenes with an animal who would stare at him perfectly on camera, but then completely ignore him the moment the director called cut. Fact 9. Father and son hated each other. As Moose aged during Frasier's later seasons, the production team gradually transitioned to using his son Enzo to take over the role of Eddie for more physically demanding scenes or when Moose needed rest. This arrangement created a practical solution to the challenge of having an aging dog continue to perform tricks and actions that required youth and energy. However, it also created an unexpected problem that made scheduling significantly more complicated.
And yet so much energy, fearless little dog with a lot of personality and charisma.
According to their trainer, Matilda Ducagny, Moose and Enzo genuinely could not stand each other. This wasn't a matter of mild canine annoyance or occasional growling. Father and son had such a strong mutual dislike that they couldn't be in the same room together without becoming aggressive and stressed. The hostility between them was so intense that the production team had to carefully coordinate their schedules to ensure the 2 dogs never overlapped on set. When Moose was working, Enzo had to be kept completely separate, usually waiting in a different location entirely. When it was time for Enzo to perform, Moose had to be removed from the area first. This made certain filming days more logistically challenging than they would have been otherwise, essentially requiring the production to manage 2 separate canine actors who refused to acknowledge each other's existence peacefully. The reason for their mutual hatred was never entirely clear, though animal behaviorists who heard about the situation suggested it might have stemmed from dominance issues or territorial behavior that developed during Enzo's training. Regardless of the cause, it created a genuinely bizarre behind-the-scenes situation where the 2 dogs playing the same beloved character across different episodes were essentially mortal enemies who had to be kept apart like feuding actors in a troubled production. Fact 10. Sardine oil made Eddie kiss actors. One of Eddie's most memorable behaviors on Frasier was his tendency to stare intensely at characters, particularly Frasier himself, and occasionally lick or nuzzle the actors in moments of apparent affection.
Eddie's unlike any dog I've ever known in my life, in that I don't even consider him a dog, I consider him an actor.
These interactions always seemed spontaneous and natural, as if Eddie was genuinely expressing emotion or responding to the scene's dramatic beats. However, the reality behind these tender moments was considerably less romantic and significantly more fishy. To get Moose to lick an actor's face or nuzzle against them on cue, the production team used various food-based scents and substances that would attract the dog's attention and encourage him to make contact. The most commonly used attractant was sardine oil, which crew members would carefully dab onto actors' faces before scenes where Eddie needed to show affection. The oil was nearly invisible on camera, but created a scent that Moose found irresistible, causing him to lean in and lick enthusiastically. For scenes requiring Eddie to nuzzle against someone's neck or ear, the production team had a different trick. They would apply liver pâté behind the actor's ears, hidden from the camera's view but perfectly positioned to draw Moose's interest. This meant actors knew in advance when they were going to get a face full of dog tongue, giving them time to mentally prepare for the sensation of being licked while trying to stay in character. The use of these food products was so routine that it became just another part of the technical setup before shooting, no different from adjusting lighting or checking sound levels. What viewers saw as Eddie spontaneously showing love was actually a highly calculated production technique, with actors essentially turning themselves into human appetizers to get the right performance from their canine co-star. Fact 11. Grammer played Frasier for 20 consecutive years. Kelsey Grammer's portrayal of Frasier Crane represents one of the longest continuous character performances in television history, spanning an extraordinary period that few actors have ever matched.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome America's favorite TV psychiatrist, Kelsey Grammer. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
Welcome to the show.
Grammer first stepped into the role of the pompous psychiatrist in 1984, when Frasier was introduced as a recurring character on Cheers. The character was originally intended to appear in only a few episodes as a love interest for Diane Chambers, but audiences responded so positively that Frasier became a regular part of the ensemble. Grammer continued playing the character throughout Cheers' remaining seasons until that show ended in 1993. Then, immediately, without any break, Frasier spun off into his own series, which premiered in September 1993 and ran until May 2004. This meant Grammer played the same character in primetime television for 20 consecutive years without interruption, an almost unprecedented achievement. When Frasier ended, Grammer's 20-year run tied him with James Arness, who had played Marshal Matt Dillon on Gunsmoke for 20 seasons, for the longest-running character portrayal by a single actor in American television history at that time. The consistency of Grammer's performance across two different shows and two distinct character arcs, from Cheers' insufferable know-it-all to Frasier's more vulnerable and sympathetic protagonist, demonstrated remarkable range within what remained recognizably the same person. Audiences watched Frasier Crane grow, change, fail, succeed, and evolve for 2 full decades, creating an unusual sense of intimacy and familiarity. Few fictional characters have had the opportunity to develop across such an extended timeline, and fewer still have been brought to life by the same actor for the entire journey without recasting or interruption. Fact 12. The Space Needle kept disappearing. Throughout Frasier's 11 seasons, careful viewers occasionally noticed a significant and rather glaring continuity error involving one of Seattle's most iconic landmarks. The Space Needle, which should have been visible from Frasier's apartment windows given the supposed location of his building, appeared and disappeared, seemingly at random from episode to episode. In some episodes, the distinctive tower stood prominently in the skyline, visible through Frasier's windows exactly where you'd expect it to be. However, in other episodes, sometimes even within the same season, the Space Needle was completely absent from the view, with the cityscape looking noticeably different and the famous structure nowhere to be seen. This wasn't a matter of different camera angles or times of day affecting visibility. The Space Needle was literally present in some episodes and gone in others, suggesting the backdrop itself was being changed. The reason for this inconsistency likely related to the fact that Frasier's apartment was a studio set rather than a real location, with window views created using various backdrop techniques.
You know, Frasier returning to the old KACL radio station. It looks like they got every detail of the set right. Was it sort of like walking into a time machine?
Different backdrops were probably used at different times during production, and not all of them included the Space Needle or placed it in the same position. While most casual viewers never noticed the disappearing landmark, Seattle natives and detail-oriented fans who watched episodes multiple times began catching the error and discussing it online. The continuity mistake became one of those small imperfections that dedicated fans learned to spot and enjoy pointing out. Similar to how viewers of other shows notice minor prop placement errors or changing background details. Despite being set so specifically in Seattle and making such frequent references to local culture and locations, Frasier apparently couldn't keep its most famous landmark consistently visible. Fact 13. A record-breaking 37 Emmy Awards. Frasier didn't just win Emmy Awards. It absolutely dominated them in a way that few television shows have before or since. Over the course of its 11-season run from 1993 to 2004, the show accumulated an astounding 37 Primetime Emmy Awards across various categories. This wasn't just a respectable number of wins for a sitcom. It was a television record that shattered the previous benchmark. Before Frasier, The Mary Tyler Moore Show held the record for most Emmy wins by a series, a record that had stood unchallenged for years as a testament to that groundbreaking comedy's excellence. Frasier surpassed it decisively, establishing a new standard for Emmy success that seemed nearly impossible to beat. The wins weren't concentrated in just one or two categories either. Frasier won for Outstanding Comedy Series 5 consecutive years in a row, along with numerous acting awards for its ensemble cast, writing awards, directing awards, and technical awards for everything from sound mixing to art direction. The show's dominance was so complete during its mid-90s peak that Emmy ceremonies became somewhat predictable, with Frasier expected to take home multiple trophies each year. For 12 years, Frasier's 37 Emmy record stood as the high watermark for television achievement. However, in 2016, Game of Thrones surpassed it by winning its 38th Emmy Award.
And the Emmy goes to Game of Thrones,
finally breaking Frasier's long-held record. Even so, the fact that a half-hour sitcom held the record for total Emmy wins for over a decade, outlasting countless dramas, limited series, and other ambitious productions, speaks to just how exceptional Frasier was during its original run. Fact 14. Celebrity phone callers literally phoned it in. One of Frasier's most memorable recurring elements was the parade of celebrity guest voices who called into Frasier's radio show with various problems and neuroses. Over the course of the series, an impressive roster of famous names provided voices for these unseen callers, including Kevin Bacon, Halle Berry, Stephen King, Carrie Fisher, Gary Sinise, and many others. What made these guest appearances unusual was how they were actually recorded. Unlike typical television guest stars who come to the set, work with the cast, and record their dialogue in a professional studio environment, most of Frasier's celebrity phone callers never visited the production at all. Instead, they literally phoned in their performances by calling a recording line and delivering their dialogue over an actual telephone. This arrangement meant some extremely famous actors recorded their Frasier appearances from wherever they happened to be at the moment, using whatever phone was convenient. Some called from payphones while out running errands. Others recorded their lines from home phones while holding babies or sitting in their kitchens. The recording quality was sometimes less than ideal because they weren't using professional microphone equipment, but the slight telephone line distortion actually added to the authenticity of the scenes, making it sound exactly like real radio callers would sound.
You're listening to KACL 780 on your AM dial. This is Dr. Frasier Crane.
This casual approach to celebrity guest appearances benefited both the show and the guest stars. Frasier got famous names attached to episodes without the cost and scheduling complexity of bringing actors to set, while celebrities could make a quick appearance on a hit show without disrupting their schedules or traveling to a studio. The arrangement was so successful that it became standard practice for the show's phone caller guest spots. Fact 15. Martin's father was dead, then alive. One of the most significant plot holes between Cheers and Frasier involves the very existence of Martin Crane, Frasier's father, who became a central character in the spin-off series. During Frasier's time on Cheers, he explicitly stated on multiple occasions that his father was dead. This wasn't a vague reference or something that could be interpreted differently. Frasier clearly and directly said his father had passed away, establishing it as a firm fact about his background. However, when the Frasier spin-off was developed, the creators made the creative decision that giving Frasier a living father would create better storytelling opportunities and character dynamics. They wanted to explore the relationship between the cultured, pretentious Frasier and a working-class father with completely different values and interests. The problem was that this directly contradicted what had been established on Cheers, creating an obvious continuity error that longtime viewers would immediately notice. Rather than ignoring the contradiction and hoping audiences wouldn't remember or care, the Frasier writers eventually decided to address it directly in a later episode. They crafted a scene where this discrepancy was explained away by having it revealed that Frasier had lied about his father being dead during one of his many arguments with Martin. The explanation suggested Frasier had been so angry at his father at some point that he'd told people Martin was dead, essentially disowning him emotionally. While this retroactive explanation attempted to patch the plot hole, it raised almost as many questions as it answered, because it meant Frasier had maintained this lie consistently throughout his years in Boston and never corrected anyone. Fact 16. Daphne's accent was completely wrong. Jane Leeves, who played the endearing physical therapist Daphne Moon, is actually British in real life, but her character's accent on the show was supposed to be from Manchester, England, a specific regional dialect with very distinctive characteristics. The problem? Leeves is actually from East Grinstead in Sussex, hundreds of miles from Manchester, and her natural accent is completely different from the one Daphne was supposed to have. Rather than hiring a dialect coach to perfect an authentic Manchester accent, Leeves essentially performed what she thought a Manchester accent sounded like.
Just little things I sense about people. I mean, it's not like I can pick the lottery. If I could, I wouldn't be talking to the likes of you.
Resulting in a somewhat vague North of England sound that didn't really match any specific region. British viewers noticed this immediately and were often puzzled by Daphne's supposedly Manchester origins when her accent wandered all over the Northern English map, sometimes even drifting into slight Irish territory during certain episodes. American audiences generally didn't notice, because to most American ears, all British accents that aren't posh London sound roughly similar. But for British viewers, Daphne's accent was the equivalent of an American character claiming to be from Boston while speaking with a blend of Southern drawl and Midwestern twang. The show's producers were apparently aware of this inconsistency, but decided it didn't matter enough to warrant the expense and effort of intensive dialect coaching, betting correctly that the vast majority of their American audience wouldn't know the difference. Fact 17. The show was almost set in Denver. When Frasier was first being developed as a Cheers spin-off, the creative team seriously considered setting it in Denver, Colorado, rather than Seattle, Washington. The thinking was that Denver represented a sophisticated city with cultural institutions that could support Frasier's character while being different enough from Boston to give the show its own distinct identity. However, Seattle ultimately won out for several specific reasons. First, the city's well-known coffee culture. This was the mid-90s when Seattle coffee shops were becoming a national phenomenon. Seemed like a perfect fit for Frasier's refined sensibilities. Second, Seattle's rain and gray skies created a more melancholic, introspective atmosphere that the writers felt would enhance the show's psychological themes. Frasier was, after all, a psychiatrist who spent much of his time pondering human nature and relationships. Third, and perhaps most importantly, Seattle had a more European feel that aligned with Frasier's continental pretensions, while Denver felt too Western and outdoorsy for a character who preferred opera to hiking. The decision to choose Seattle proved brilliant, as the city became almost a character itself in the show, with frequent references to local landmarks, culture, and weather patterns that gave Frasier a strong sense of place. Fact 18. Frasier and Niles never drank real sherry. Throughout the series, Frasier and Niles are constantly shown enjoying expensive sherry, discussing its vintage and quality with the same seriousness wine connoisseurs debate Bordeaux. However, the actors were never actually drinking sherry during filming. Instead, the prop department filled those elegant crystal glasses with iced tea or apple juice, depending on the desired color for the scene. This was partly a practical decision. Filming television episodes involves multiple takes, and if the actors actually consumed alcohol throughout every scene, they'd be quite drunk by the end of the day. But it was also a taste preference. Kelsey Grammer and David Hyde Pierce both found actual sherry unpalatable and refused to drink it repeatedly for multiple takes, even in small sips. The sweet, fortified wine simply wasn't to their taste, making the characters' enthusiastic appreciation for fine sherry one of the show's most ironic ongoing jokes. The actors became so practiced at pretending to savor their fake sherry that viewers never questioned whether they were actually drinking the real thing, swirling their glasses and discussing notes of hazelnut and burnt caramel while actually tasting sweetened tea. Fact 19. The dog outlived his owner. In a heartbreaking turn of events, Moose the dog actually outlived John Mahoney, the actor who played his on-screen owner, Martin Crane.
I call him Eddie Spaghetti.
Oh, he likes pasta.
No, he has worms.
Though not in the way you might think. Moose retired from acting in 2000 after appearing in most of Frasier's run, with his son Enzo taking over the role for the final seasons. Moose lived peacefully in retirement until 2006, passing away at the age of 16, which is quite elderly for a Jack Russell Terrier. John Mahoney, meanwhile, continued acting regularly after Frasier ended in 2004, appearing in numerous films and stage productions. He remained active in Chicago theater until his death in 2018 at the age of 77. So while Mahoney ultimately lived longer than Moose in absolute terms, the dog actually survived longer after the show ended, living 6 additional years after retirement, while Mahoney continued working for 14 more years. The relationship between man and dog was complex throughout filming, but Mahoney always spoke fondly of Moose in interviews after the show ended, acknowledging that Eddie was absolutely essential to what made Martin Crane such a beloved character. Fact 20. The brothers weren't really drinking coffee either. Just as Frasier and Niles weren't drinking real sherry, they also weren't drinking actual coffee during the countless Cafe Nervosa scenes where they sat analyzing their lives over espresso, given that some episodes featured the characters consuming multiple cups of coffee throughout various scenes. Drinking real espresso for every take would have resulted in the actors being jittery, over-caffeinated messes by the end of filming. Instead, the prop department used decaffeinated coffee that had been brewed and then cooled to a safe drinking temperature that wouldn't burn the actors' mouths during multiple takes. Even better, for scenes shot later in the day, the coffee was often just colored water with no coffee at all. This practical solution meant the actors could sip naturally throughout scenes without worrying about caffeine overload or scalding their tongues. However, it created an amusing contrast with the characters' frequent discussions about the quality and preparation of their coffee, passionately debating foam texture and roast profiles while drinking what was essentially brown water. The barista equipment at Cafe Nervosa was real and functional, but it was rarely actually making coffee during filming. Instead, just providing atmospheric steam and mechanical sounds while the actors performed with their pre-made props. The legacy that remains. These 20 weird facts barely scratch the surface of what made Frasier such a unique production. From impossible dogs to resurrected fathers, from fake beverages to disappearing landmarks, the show was held together by creative decisions, both brilliant and bizarre. What's remarkable is that despite all these behind-the-scenes oddities, continuity errors, and production compromises, Frasier remains one of the most beloved and critically acclaimed sitcoms in television history. The show's 37 Emmy Awards weren't won because everything was perfect behind the scenes. They were won because the final product, whatever strange alchemy created it, worked beautifully. Sometimes the best art comes from the most chaotic circumstances. Sometimes a nightmare dog becomes a television icon. Sometimes a character invented by accident becomes irreplaceable. And sometimes, the most refined and sophisticated show on television is held together by sardine oil, fake sherry, and 2 dogs who absolutely hated each other. That's the real magic of Frasier. Not that everything was perfect, but that all these weird, wonderful pieces somehow came together to create something greater than the sum of its parts. What's your favorite behind-the-scenes fact about the show? Did any of these revelations change how you see those classic episodes?